Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here tonight for our Inspiring Greatness series. My name is Millie Haffold. I'm the Dean of Academics. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce to you Linda Foreman, who will be giving the introduction. Linda is sitting right over here, taking off her jacket. Angie Gardner, our fabulous librarian, and Jason Turner, the most amazing science teacher ever. With no further delays, I will have Mrs. Foreman come up and address you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight with us. This is actually one of the most exciting of the seminars, that, at least for me, because it's kind of one of my passions, classics. The human race for thousands of years has been writing experiences, telling us how to meet our everlasting problems, how to struggle with darkness, and to rejoice in light. What fools we should be to try to live our lives without the guidance of the generations that have gone before us. This idea is one of the foundational building blocks of John Adams Academy. In our original statement of vision and mission that we handed out and that is on our website, you can read our statement on the classics, but I would like to highlight just a few points. A classic is a work that can be experienced again and again. A classic or a great book has three essential qualities: great theme, noble language, and universality. And I would add a fourth, that to be a great book, it really has to speak to you as the individual. Classics open our eyes to the true nature of our world. They reveal our essential humanity, and they teach us about human nature. Books, great books, bring us face to face with greatness, hence the title of our seminar tonight. Classics force us to study quietly, ponder, analyze, think, ask, discover, cry, laugh, struggle, and above all, to feel, to change, to become. A classic gives us the personal wisdom to be better as an individual and as a citizen of a free nation. Now, classics come in many forms. They're not just read. But tonight I will particularly focus on literature. Literature is simply life selected and condensed into words. The expression of truth, the transmission of knowledge and emotions between man and man from generation to generation. These are the purposes of literature. And literature generally means light. Light of any kind is important, but the kind of mental, spiritual, and moral light that can come from great literature can nourish our souls and give tone to our lives that almost nothing else can do. The human mind itself is a possession of uncalculated value, but it needs to be lighted, charged, vitalized. The mind can get balanced, reason, foresight, and understanding from the thoughts of others. The right kind of ideas introduced into the mind breeds initiative, moral courage, the will to grow, a love of fairness. When the mind is not properly pollinized and vitalized by the inspiration of stimulating thoughts and uplifting ideals, much of its power is wasted. I would venture to say that most people walk around with all their power wasted. A chemist or a lawyer or an inventor does not depend on his own discoveries for his occupational success. He appropriates for his own use all of the tested methods and good ideas of all the best men in his field. I'm sure Jason will address that tonight. What an opportunity we have to enlighten the mind, teach the heart, enrich the soul, and charge ambition with power. Suppose that each of us tonight selects 10 authors that we would most like to resemble. That is my challenge for you tonight. Our 10 should be those with the greatest power to move us personally. Then suppose that we proceed to exhaust them one at a time. That is, we first select our author and then read everything that he's ever written. We consider his every idea, we rethink his every thought, and we live his life over again. We try to understand his moods and his reason. We probe and search and pry into every corner of his life. We leave no mental pocket unsearched, no emotional file unexplored. As we proceed, we can isolate and adopt his most stimulating procedures for our own. We may be thrilled by his example, and we can capture the spirit of his success. Our hero may have spent 80 years of successful living, but the essential parts of his experience have been distilled for us into a book which we can absorb in a few hours or a few days. During his lifetime, Shakespeare wrote 37 plays. He staffed them with over 1,000 characters. Each of his characters is a personification of some personality trait. Shakespeare's Julius Caesar is the personification of courage. Cassius said of Caesar, "Why, man, he doth bestride this narrow world and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Now in the names of all the gods at once, upon what meat does this our Caesar feed, that he is grown so great?" That is a very good question. For greatness does feed on a certain diet. Caesar fed on courage. Caesar said, "Cowards die many deaths before their death. The valiant never taste of death but once. Of all the wonders that I yet have seen, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. Danger knows full well that Caesar is more dangerous than he. We are two lions, littered in one day, and I, the elder and more terrible, and Caesar shall go forth." From Caesar we may take courage to our own hearts. Oliver Wendell Holmes pointed out, "A mind once stretched to a new idea never returns to its original dimension." Through literature, we may have the access to the greatest ideas that have ever been thought in the world. And all of them that we can master belong to us. Seneca once wrote, "Whatsoever has been well said by anyone is my property." Thomas Edison said that even he had never had very many original thoughts. He had only taken the ideas already known and fitted them together into new combinations to make new applications. Our success in life is determined not so much by our own mental invention and manufacture as by how well we apply the thoughts already available and use them to fill our own life's needs. Now today I had a wonderful experience. Mrs. Schumann in 3rd grade had asked me several weeks ago to come and teach the 3rd grade Plato's Allegory of the Cave. That was harder than I thought it was going to be for 8-year-olds. But as I had the prisoners chained in my pop-up tent and the scholars doing shadow puppets on the cave wall, I had hoped in some small way that they might understand the symbols and Plato's purpose in their own lives. And I was astounded. Now, some of them probably will never remember anything but making shadow pictures in a pop-up tent. But some of them got it. And one little boy, he said, "Mrs. Foreman, I know. And then he got so serious that I had my mouth open. I'm not sure whose son he was, but he said, "I believe that my cave was homeschooling, because I came from homeschooling, and I liked it, but then I came to John Adams, and it's been really hard. So it's hard, but I came into the light, and he says, I believe that all of those symbols apply in my life. The way he was talking, I'm just like, seriously? And I think some of the other kids in the class with him like, who is he? And I thought, you know, he was homeschooled very well, because he was able to not only make connections and understand the symbolism for 8-year-olds who are used to, everything has to be concrete. It's very difficult. We spent quite a bit of time defining allegory and what that means and talking about symbols. But this little boy was able to make that connection, that there were symbols in his life, and we talked about how hard it is to come out of a cave. And when we really, really want something badly, that it's difficult. And he realized that I have a lot more homework now. It is so hard. But I love it. And as we talked, I thought, wow, one of the greatest classics ever written that most adults do not understand. This little 8-year-old understood. So if I only got through to one child in that class today, I would have liked to have been a flag on the wall tonight, because they were challenged to take their little sheet home that we've written on and teach their parents the allegory of the cave. I can't imagine what profound things were said. But it was such a positive experience to see great literature teach that they can take something that's been around for millennia and apply it in their life and never be the same, because those ideas today stretch their mind, and their mind will never go back to the size that it was. From great literature of the world, we can select particular ideas that can best make up our individual deficits. And great literature is about the only place where we can find virtues in any quantity and any quality. We may see the most tragic failures side by side with the greatest successes. In the pages of literature, we may live with the lowly and think the thoughts of the great. We may travel with Napoleon or live with Hitler. We may feel the possibilities of both evil and good in their true perspective. Then we may perfect our own lives quite as much from the one as from the other. Through great literature, we may make our choices of life's values under the most favorable of circumstances. A regular period set aside each day for a few years can make each of us a genius in living. It can make us the beneficiaries of all the great and good who have ever lived on the earth. Reading is the process by which we take possession of this fabulous inheritance. It enables us to live 1,000 lives in one. We get the profit of every great man's life without the risk. We may have the experience without the danger. By reliving his successes, new visions, new experiences, new ambitions, and new accomplishments can be introduced even to the most ordinary life. It seems perfectly clear that the quality and volume of our reading is one of our greatest of life's opportunities, and it is certainly one of our foremost responsibilities. The aim of liberal education, which your children are receiving here at John Adams Academy, is human excellence, both public and private, and it can only flourish if the adult population understands and values it. And the best way to do that is to have it yourself. To put an end to the spirit of inquiry that has characterized the West, and particularly America, it is not necessary to burn our books. All we have to do is leave them unread for a generation. On the other hand, Americans have great leisure to become educated, to understand our tradition. A revival of interest in the great books can re-inspire our drive and creativeness as individuals and as a nation, restoring America's heritage and developing servant leaders. I'm so grateful that we have two of the greatest examples of modeling this here at our school to speak to you tonight, and I'll turn the time over to them.
Hi, I'm Angie Gardner. I'm the librarian. And I had prepared this great, long thing for me to read, and I thought, you know what, that's just not me. So I threw that out, and I just wrote a bunch of notes. So forgive me if this is not professional. The library is a very important place for our school. It is a place where the kids can come, our scholars can come, and they can choose the books that speak to them. Some kids don't read. We have scholars that don't like reading. I had one scholar last year tell me, "Oh, Mrs. Gardner, I can't find the book. I just hate reading." I said, "Well, you haven't found the right book yet." So we talked, and I found out what she was interested in, and I gave her a book. I said, "Let me know what you think." It went on for a few months, and by the end of the school year, she said, "Oh, Mrs. Gardner, I love the library. I love reading." And that just made my world. It was the best day I had last year, was when she said that. I used to be a liberal. I grew up in Boston, and we really think the government should take care of everybody, and unfortunately that's how I was raised. And so I read the Constitution eventually, and I went, uh-oh, I was wrong. That's not what my ancestors fought for, and, well, I need to reevaluate this. So classics are very important because it holds the truth. It gives us guidance, and it becomes a part of us. One of the things about a classical education is it's inspire. You have to inspire the scholars or they will not learn. It is up to them. They are the ones that are the keepers of their education. If they are not inspired, they're not going to learn. I spent most of my school years not learning at all because I wasn't inspired. Every day I come on this campus and I am inspired by Mr. Turner, Mr. and Mrs. Foreman, when I see them, Karen Hansen, our scholars, Lindsay when she waves at me enthusiastically in the morning. We are all creating a culture of greatness here. As a parent, this school has challenged me more than I ever thought. I don't know if I brought the picture. There is a picture. I don't know. Do you guys remember the Davis pepper spray incident? My mother-in-law watches the news a lot, and so they had this image of a policeman just spraying the protesters. It's a pretty, I don't know, incriminating photo. And my son, who was in Mrs. Brown's class, looked at that and said, all their hoods are up. Why are their hoods up? They would have known this was coming. And he started asking questions. What caused those policemen to spray these protesters that looked like they were peaceful? And so we did some research. Well, it turns out those policemen were surrounded by hundreds of people. The fact that my son wanted to learn the truth about this picture that the media was portraying was like, oh, look at these horrible policemen. It was very inspiring to me, but it was challenging because we had to keep researching and researching and researching. There was a day when we were eating pizza, and somebody said, oh, I'm going to give 110% at the soccer game. And I said, you know what, that's not possible. What do you mean it's not possible? I'm like, all right, here's a glass. It holds 8 ounces. 100% would equal 8 ounces, right? Yeah. If I poured 10 ounces in it, where would the extra water go? Well, it would fall out. It can only hold 100%. My son says, well, all right, Mom. Vitamins. I can get 110% of my vitamin C. So this is just the type of education that John Adams provides for our scholars. Just them thinking on their own, looking for the truth, is just, it's amazing to me. It changes my life every day. I have a few more minutes. Okay. We talk at our dinner table. Does everybody have dinner with their kids? And you guys have really great conversations. My children wanted to know exactly how much force it would take to get out of a black hole. I don't know. Let's talk about it. So we went through theory. We went through Doctor Who. Let's see, H.G. Wells, The Time Machine. That was brought up. Because Nigel figured it was a black hole that H.G. Wells went into, and he really thought it out logically, that it kind of made sense. So at the science fair, I had to come and ask Mr. Turner, can you get out of a black hole? We don't always find the answers, but if we search and we read, we can find them within ourselves. How many of you carry around your pocket constitution? It comes in handy. I teach a middle school class at my church, and we talked about the pressures of middle school and praying in their faith, and how do they keep their faith. And one boy said, oh, well, we can't pray. Oh, wait a minute. I believe you can pray. Here's our Constitution. Let's look up our amendments here. Freedom of religion, not from religion. You have this. He's like, do you carry that everywhere? Yeah, I do. I do carry it everywhere. Last week, it was after dinner. I was doing the dishes, and my kids are watching Jeopardy, because that's what we do in our family. And the final Jeopardy question was Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. So I go, Mom, get in here, you got to know this one. All right, so I go in there, and the question was, or the answer, I should say, no, it was a question. What amendment talks about sex? I said 19th. My kids are like, what? And my husband said, oh yeah, that's the one that guarantees women the right to vote, doesn't it? I said, yeah, that is. Well, there were 2 women and 1 man. The first woman said, oh, it's the 20th. Like, oh, I don't remember the 20th. So I got out my thing. But then the next woman said, oh, it's the 22nd. And then the man said, oh, it's the 19th. And he was correct. And my daughter looked back at me and said, Mom, both those women didn't know what amendment gave them the right to vote. I'm like, that's really sad. That's very sad. She's like, that's irony for you. Yeah, that is. So everything about the school, about literature, about learning, about talking, discussing. Every moment of the day is a teachable moment if you take the time with your kids. I don't watch much TV, but I do read a lot. And if I didn't read a lot, my kids probably wouldn't read a lot, because I'm their example, and we have to model what we teach. I'm going to finish a little early. I apologize. But I want to leave you with this. When we read, we become part of the book. And the book becomes part of us. And that's why it is very important that we read great works and take in great information and great music, so that we ourselves can become great. Thank you.
Welcome everybody this evening. My name is Jason Turner, and I'm your middle school and high school science teacher, so certainly welcome. Before I kind of begin this evening, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I became a teacher, and that way you can kind of understand why literature is important to me. I am a byproduct of the large inner city school, the dreaded school that no one likes, the large one with the big gate around it that looks like a combination between a condemned building and a California correctional institution. That's the one I graduated from high school. When I graduated in 1986, I graduated in the top 1/3 of my class with a 2.1 GPA. 2.1. I mean, some of my classmates walking across the stage with me were holding on to things like 1.4, 1.5. They were given their diploma, a handshake, and they were told thanks for coming out. 5 days after I graduated from high school, I entered boot camp and stayed in the military for a good bit of time. When I went from active to reserve status, I came home and began college. There was a little bit of time between me graduating high school and starting college, a significant amount, a little bit more than a decade. So coming from that ill-fated treadmill of education and entering college, I had 2 strikes against me going in. Number one, I had no foundation, absolutely none. I had no skills. I remember my horror story. My first 2 classes in college I ever took, basic math, basic English, and I thought that that would be a good place to start. So I showed up at math, and math was kind of a no-brainer. I've always been good at math and numbers. Oh, okay, well, this makes sense. So I rolled next door to the English classroom, and this is during a summer session at the local community college. And when I walked in, this woman at the front, the professor, was using this word, a noun, and she kept on describing it as a noun. And I sat there and I was like, I used to know what that was. So in the middle of class, I had to get up and go to the student library to find a dictionary, to open it up, to figure out that a noun was a person, place, or thing. Consequently, within 7 years of the day I began my first day of college, I graduated with a 3.98 GPA with my undergraduate. My first master's degree, I was the top of my class. My second master's degree, I was at the top of my class. I was hungry for education, and it's because I flat out wasn't given it when I was younger. It made me want more. It made me want it all. How I became a teacher is, once I got my first master's degree, I was diagnosed with stage 4 adenocarcinoma, which is lung cancer. And being forced to kind of put myself in that position I couldn't get out of, you're kind of forced to ask yourself, what are some of the things that mean the very most to you? And I look back at the things I've done with my life. I served my country, and I became a registered nurse, both of which serve humanity. And the thing I liked about both of them is serving others. There's no higher purpose in this life than to serve others. And that is a lesson, consequently, our classics teach us. Many of the classics are built on the pretense of servitude and its importance in building not only our communities, but our country as a whole. So I told myself that I enjoyed educating others. I enjoyed patient education. So I'll tell you what, the getting sick with cancer thing, that was kind of an inconvenience. But let's keep on going to school. I did that. I couldn't work, but I did chemotherapy 3 days a week. I went to school 5 days a week. And I kept on going. I didn't stop. And that's the only reason I'm standing here today. So the question that I propose to many of my scholars through some of the classics is, how bad do you want your goals? For every goal in life, there's a pay value. And this is also something that our classic literature teaches us. We all say we want things in life, but what are you willing to pay to get those things? You want a good life. What does that mean? You want to go to a good school. What are you willing to do to get there? And these are some of the questions and answers our upper grade scholars are being faced with today. And this is why grounding them in that quality education using classic literature in all your disciplines produces a scholar that's well-rounded, well-suited for their environment, and allows them to perfect their special gifts that allow them to go forward and do the very thing that they were put on this earth to do. So before I begin, does anybody have any questions? Well, with that, let's get going. So what is the classic and classic literature? When you Google this or type this online, there is a plethora, just this montage of things telling you what a classic is. You've got a classic car, classic piece of art, and there's always some dusty book sitting there on the internet. Somebody took a picture. What is the most random book you have that looks like it's been well-aged? Let's plop it down and take a picture of it. But it doesn't really define it real well, especially for use in the classroom. So I put forth a few simple bullets to kind of explain and kind of define what that is. Because once we define what it is, we can better understand how it's used in the classroom. Our first bullet, right off the bat, is a classic is not always a book. A classic can be a piece of art, a painting, a poem. The idea is this, is when we look at it, we always have a multitude of points of view. Something that we get from it every time we refer to it. Something that enriches our life for years to come. The idea is classics themselves teach us lessons of information that we use, continually learn throughout our life. There's a few books that I've read many times. Right off the bat, Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings. It's a book of strategy. If you go to any military college, you study finance, business. This is a business's Bible, per se. It's a way of strategy. How to go out there and make the most money. How to go out there and win the battle. But in the end, probably the most powerful section is his 21 manners in which you live your life. It's a section called The Void. It's only 1 page long. It starts out with things like, do nothing for mere pleasure. And it goes on and on and on, but the last one is simple. Though you may lose your life, you should never lose your honor. A lesson that we should all probably teach to our children. Life is not finite. It will come to an end someday. And how you choose to live that life, whether it's standing up or laying down, is entirely a reflection of your decisions. How we choose to use these classics enrich the curriculum. And the goal today is to get you guys to understand how we actually use them in the fields of science and mathematics. Because when we think of classics, what we really think of is things like literature and history. But this is kind of egocentric, meaning it's not just those disciplines. When you go and you step back and you look in time regarding math and science and how we thought about the world around us, what you see is this, is that from early thought, we had this intermediate stage that developed the current thinking we have now. So when you can use that classic literature to show, to illustrate to the students how 2,000 years ago somebody thought that the earth was the center of the universe and the sun went around it, to nowadays, a handful of lessons later and many, many thousands of years, we figured out that it's the opposite. Where did we get that information? Well, some of that progress led to other things in science, other discoveries, other schools of thought that are still being studied today. So, let's keep going. What are some common classics used in math and science? Right off the bat, I would say the big one everybody leans to is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is read in 7th grade and in 10th and 11th grade. 7th grade here is life science. If I was to describe life science, it would be kind of like a beginning or an entry-level course into biology, where you're literally just cutting across the top of all your disciplines. Things like cellular biology, cellular physiology, genetics, and certainly evolution. So when I use my 2nd edition printing of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, and I lay it on the copier, and I copy it for the students, and I hand it to them, believe me when I tell you they have some questions. They have some questions. They turn around and ask me things like, right off the bat, was evolution real? And my answer is simply this: things do change over time. And from a scientific perspective, that is how we define it. If you expect me to ever stand at the front of my classroom and draw a diagonal line where I have a man and an ape, and then tell the students that this is, in fact, what it actually looks like, it will never happen. For 2 reasons. Number one, science is about gathering data, supporting the hypothesis, and going back and reflecting back about it and communicating the results to those around you. If I was to do that, I would not be the statesman in science, because I cannot back up that claim. I cannot support it. I can tell the students, according to the fossil record, here's the species that were alive during this time. But what we cannot do in science is necessarily connect the dots. That is one of the weakest aspects of that whole philosophy of man and ape being connected. So consequently, when I give the students that classic piece of literature, and they read that beautiful, noble language Darwin writes in it, concerning his observations while he was on the Galapagos Island, talking about how the progenitors of man and ape, simply earlier forms of man and ape, although we both have opposable thumbs, apes, their hands, the tops of their hands are like the bottom of our feet. Our hands are far less specific than that. And he goes on and on about describing the hand of a primate and describing the hand of a human. So when you read that literature, it does not support that. The truth is this: he makes these wonderful observations that basically supports the hypothesis that man and ape have never been related. And you only get that through reading the literature. If you were to pick up the modern 7th grade textbook that is used in Placer County, and I've seen 3 or 4 variations of it, on some page there's always about 3/4 of a page that's a single diagram, and that's got a couple of key points in it. You've always got the aquatic iguana that's only found in the Galapagos, about how the life forms, the diversity of life that was recorded by Darwin was so out of control that people called him a liar, and that the ship he traveled on was the HMS Beagle. And that is the word. That is it. And then we wonder why our scholars don't know the truth or the essence behind the literature. It's really simple. We've not provided it for them. We have not. We've not given them the opportunity to go through and pull the truth from that literature so they can decipher it for themselves. And consequently, teaching at a school that has got a student body that's well-grounded in their faith, what I find is this, is when I give them classic literature, and when I show them what it looks like to work through it, I not only give them the heart and the soul and the quality understanding of that literature, I give them the factual information to support that documentation so that whatever system of faith they have is reinforced. And that might sound kind of contrary. How can a scientist and a teacher in science reinforce faith? It's quite simple. By giving your scholars Charles Darwin, they understand that Darwin is not the father of evolution. There were many men before him, Wallace, Lamarck. Charles Darwin is simply the guy that showed up and said, you know, the environment puts a pressure on every organism on the planet. And if you have a structure, a protein, an enzyme that allows you to be successful, you will keep going in your environment. And if you lack that, you will not. You will perish from the earth. Well, to me, being a man of science and being a man of faith, that is called natural selection. And that sounds strongly like this thing I was taught in a church called intelligent design. So those two things can cohabitate one another. It just depends if you are willing to offer the truth to the student. And the truth is what is inside the classic literature. My goal of being a science teacher is not to give them my interpretation of the classic literature. My goal is to give them the original documentation so they can do the interpretation for themselves by helping me work through it with them. So in addition to Charles Darwin, I've got a handful of other ones up on the board. Watson, the double helix. DNA is big nowadays. You see it on the news, you see it on the internet, and for many of your scholars, I'd be willing to bet 1/3 to 1/2 the questions on the STAR exam, ACT, SAT is grounded in genetics and cellular biology. When they know DNA, when they know Watson and Crick and their model and what they created in the year 1956, I guarantee you they pass it the first time. No repeat offenders on the ACT. Gregor Mendel. He's the guy that figured out when you mix a green plant and a yellow plant together, a lot of times you get green, but 1 out of 3 times you get a yellow plant. In his time, it was out of control. Because he turned around and he came up with this wonderful hypothesis, created a huge, to give you an idea about this man's work, get this. He was a monk in the abbey. So here he is on his hands and knees, hand pollinating 50,000 seeds by hand. 50,000. Taking the seed, rubbing the pollen on it, rolling it in the dirt, putting it in burlap, getting it wet, putting it in the soil, marking on his tally sheet, 1. And then only doing that 49,999 more times. And what he did in his year was he created probably one of the most profound implications in science. It's called heredity. This is the reason why husband and wives get together to create a whole new generation, and your children look kind of like your husband, kind of like you. He figured that out, how what he called a factor in his days were the very proteins and enzymes that he passed down to future generations. He discovered that within 1 year of Darwin's work. But he was overshadowed by the idea of Darwin and his ideas, or the ideas around Darwin's hypothesis about how man and ape were created. And because all the hoopla that people gave Darwin, it overshadowed Mendel in his famous work. Mendel is the reason why we study Mendelian genetics. That is state and college standards. That's consequently why I got my master's degree. At the very end, you've got Euclid. Has anybody in the room even heard of Euclid? Okay. Euclid, in modern day terms, he would be something like a structural engineer / part-time mathematician. And he figured out that if you got 2 numbers that are equal to the same thing, or equal to one another, they by virtue are equal to the same thing. That is the same noble language we use in our original documentation found in this country. All men are created equal under God. A mathematical principle only proven 2,000 years ago. that we still hold on to this day, that acts as a cornerstone for our country. So tying some of this rich history in science, old, with science new, the founding of our country, stepping outside what we do in science and tying in other disciplines, enriches the curriculum. It gives that old textbook, that classic literature, it gives it a voice in your student's head. Some of you in this classroom, I teach your 8th grade scholars. I'd be willing to bet if you guys were to go home now and ask your students about what it was like to take the axiomatas, the 3 laws according to Sir Isaac Newton, and translate them with Mr. Turner from Latin to Old English to New English, they'd be willing to tell you what all 3 were. And it requires more work. And to be honest with you, from a teacher's perspective, it does require a little bit more time. It flat out does. So when you guys pull in the parking lot and your students look at you and you're looking at your teacher's car and you realize your teacher's car is parked in the same place it was yesterday and your teacher's looking a little bit peaked, okay, it does require more time. But my response to that is simply this: as a parent, what is something you would not do for your child? And the answer is there's nothing we would do for them. Absolutely nothing. So consequently, as teachers here, teaching the classics, modeling what we teach, there's nothing that we would not be willing to do for them. And that's the reason why we have the hours that we do. So, why are classics an important part of education in the field of science? I would say the top reason why is the spirit of the literature. Spirit of literature simply means this: instead of giving your student a little blurb about something you saw in a textbook that's supposed to support his or her understanding of a major concept, why not give them the original text? Why not provide them that enriching opportunity to go out there and learn the original source for itself? Why not give them that opportunity? Why not enrich their lives with something that's been around far before you or I, that we still treasure and reward and pass down from one generation to the next? The end result is this, is that by using classical literature, we truly challenge the student. We really challenge them. An 8th grader reading Latin, let me tell you how that could be a tough boat to row sometimes. 8th graders are known for being one of the more difficult classes to teach, them and 10th graders, and I'll tell you why. 8th graders and 10th graders. 8th graders are not quite cool enough to be in high school, but they know they're not 7th graders, so they're kind of in this limbo. And 10th graders are the same way. They know they just started out, so that freshman year, okay, wow, that's done, I'm out of the way, but those juniors and seniors, I can't quite hang with that crowd either. So consequently, getting them to do the hard stuff that prepares them for a better quality of life as young men and women, and certainly as adults, it can be kind of challenging. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a really basic kind of lesson plan that I spread out over a couple of days regarding how I would use classic literature as the key thing in science, and then some of the activities I do around it to support it. Now notice I said I'm using classic literature as the centerpiece. Okay? Use of classic literature, example for 8th grade. The goal: students will understand Sir Isaac Newton's 3 laws of motion. That is absolutely state standard. So it starts out by me spreading out some of the lesson material. Basically what I'm getting together is a PowerPoint presentation. Because before I turn around and hit them with the classic literature, I want to use a technique in teaching called preloading. And this is where I take what I would call a direct instruction approach. And this is kind of what it looks like. This is the old stand and deliver method. This is where I stand up and basically give you the major pretense or the major concepts or major ideas of what we're actually going to be studying. And what it basically does is it lays a little bit of a foundation so that on the following day, when I present the classic literature, that classic literature allows me and the students to truly dig deep into the material so that it fosters their growth and certainly fosters understanding. So for a sample, this is the first slide that the students would see. Actually, this is the second. The first slide, it says, Sir Isaac Newton the Dude. And they all get a kick out of that because many of them have heard of Newton, and many of them have heard of the laws of motion. But science as a whole has not been well structured in many of our schools, and this is unfortunate. I think the reason it hasn't been structured well is, number one, funding. And number two, there's flat out a lot of teachers that don't know the material. If I was to go back and ask either one of my master teachers to give me Sir Isaac Newton's 3 laws of motion, I would be hard-pressed to have either one of them give me one. So hands down, this type of education has to start with the teacher. You have to know your discipline. You can't show up with a generic textbook. There is no textbook, generic textbook of classical literature. Many people don't know this. Where do you go to get this stuff? Sometimes it takes a little bit of doing, but it's out there. You have to find it, okay? You truly have to find it, so it takes a lot of effort, all right? I lucked out and actually found a second version of this book printed some time ago, believe it or not, in a garage sale. Sitting in one of those plastic milk cartons on someone's front lawn. How much do you want for that book? And by the way, that wouldn't happen to be autographed, would it? Because that would be really cool. And of course, the woman says, yeah, no one reads that stuff. How about like $1? Do you have $1? Do you know what that is? That's probably worth more than $1. Yeah, but no one reads it. Well, obviously you didn't, so I'll tell you what. Here's $1. Just give me the book. Give me the book. So what I do is I show them this PowerPoint slide. I turn around and tell them a little bit about the man. And probably one of the most interesting stories I like to tell them is why we in fact call him Sir. Somebody knows that Sir means you've been knighted. Well, what if I told you that he was knighted at the very end of his life? It was for political reasons. It wasn't because he contributed so much to science. You see, in his time, Queen Anne was struggling, trying to keep peace between Catholics and Protestants. So she's sitting on the throne wondering what to do. Okay, well, me suppressing rebellions with armed troops and just crushing the citizens of my country, this is not improving morale. So what am I going to do? I got it. I'm going to knight people. I'm going to give them title. I'm going to give them land. I'm going to pacify the masses. This should sound strongly similar to that same conversation when we circled the wagons about why our current president got the Nobel Peace Prize. This lets the students know that that type of philosophy, that type of behavior is nothing new. He was knighted during the last 3 years of his life. And it wasn't for his scientific contributions. It was to keep peace. So after giving them a little bit of understanding of who the man was, a little bit of history behind him, I give them the dreaded copy of the original document. Notice it's not in English. Notice it appears to be old, like it's been used. Other people have read this. This is good. It means it's got a little bit of character. It means it's enriched many lives. So on the first day, what I do is I turn around and give this to them, and I simply give them the instructions. I want you guys to take this home, and here's a highlighter. I want you to read through it, and I want you to highlight any word that looks familiar to you. And they kind of look at me like, are you sure? You know what? If you did this would not result in ill health to you. You will be okay. And it kind of pushes them a little bit. But when they actually sit down and look at it, here's some of the first words that they see. Things like projectilia. Projectilia, what is it? They would say a projectile. So now we would simply turn around and define it. How would you define a projectile? An object in what? motion. Now, they come back with it the next day, and this is when the real work begins. This is when we actually start to translate it. So the students come back with things like Project Tilly, and I say, okay, it's an object of motion. This is great, so what else do you have? And they'll say, well, that Movendi uniformiter. Okay, well, I don't know about the Movendi, but the uniformiter, that looks a lot like uniform. Okay, well, the other one is moving. So now you have an object moving. An object moving. Now, uniform simply means in a straight line. So an object moving in a straight line. So now I give them a few other words. Preventus mobius, preserving motion. An object in motion preserves motion. Now let's see the rest. Retarded gravitas, unless it's slowed down by gravity. And then when you get to the very end, law one piece together. An object in motion will preserve motion unless acted upon by gravity or outside forces. That is Sir Isaac Newton's first law of motion. And I piece it together with them. Some of the words will come easy to them. Projectilium. They will all show up with the word projectile. When I transfer it from Latin to Old English, the Old English term for a straight line, it's called a right line. When you tell your kids, do the right thing, behave right, be on the straight and narrow, they understand what that right line means. They've heard it before. They've heard it from all of you. So the concept of right being straight, this is not unfamiliar. So when you start putting the pieces together between the classic literature, your translation, common words with them, you're expanding their vocabulary. You're giving them, help providing them the opportunity to expand their current thinking so that they can adopt and incorporate new information into what they already have. And more importantly, above everything else, it pushes them. So once we get them with the translation, and by then the kids are like sweating, their hands are cramped from all the writing, their brain hurts. What I do is I take them outside and we kind of reinforce it with a few things. The lab and review. So the lab simply is this. To understand an object in motion, we go out here and we throw stuff. I let the kids throw heavy objects. I've got a 5-kilogram standard shot put. One of the few disciplines I got into for athletics in college was track and field, shot put, in the discus throw. So I've got all that stuff from college. So by having them go out there and throw objects, having those objects in motion, we can actually get data from it. Meaning, we can use a stopwatch. When I say go, you throw that shot put as far as you can. And the kid just sits there, ah! And they always make some strange little noise that's kind of horrible to listen to. And we all kind of poke fun at them. But when they get done throwing it, here's what we've gathered. Flight time of the object, distance the object traveled. Between flight time, so time, and distance, we can determine things like rate. With a rate and the weight of an object, we can determine things like kinetic energy, potential energy. Kinetic energy and potential energy put together as mechanical energy. How much work an object does when it actually hits something. That also supports Sir Isaac Newton's third law. When an object hits something, it generates a force on an object, and the thing it hit is creating a force equal and opposite to what it was connected with. For every reaction, there is an opposite and equal reaction. You're seeing that right up there. So, by reading that classic literature, digging deep, doing the experiments, and then once all that stuff is done, I send home a quality review sheet that I write myself to kind of take their little minds and put all this material together so they get some real hands-on stuff to include a whole lot of math. So it reinforces things like basic principles of multiplication, division, and it is not easy for them. So they understand how classic literature ties in to things like real-world problems. We understand something, we make something happen, and then we can measure it. One reinforces the other. So in summary, Classic literature used in science and math classroom enriches curriculum in a variety of methods. Number one, accuracy of information. Classic literature, especially in science, is based around things like an observation someone did, a classic experiment, whether you're talking about biology, chemistry, physics. The list goes on and on. But what you're reading is you were reading their original work. I kind of equate it to that when I was a kid and I'd go away to summer camp. We'd give you an idea what that looks like on paper. The school that I worked at before, our passing rate for STAR was 46%. We've effectively taken that number by using classic education and doubled it. So when people want to make the argument about does classic literature really support grossing education, okay, being a scientist, I have data that says yes. Okay, so if none of you have questions, I certainly thank you for coming out. And I'm here all the time. Your kids are scholars. They always treat you wonderful. They honor all of you with good behavior. And it has been nothing more than the highest privilege and the greatest responsibility I will ever know to teach all of them. So thank you.
Well, as Dean of Academics, I encourage you. No, I challenge you. I challenge you to keep reading with your children, no matter how old they get. Reading and sharing literature can be part of your lifelong relationship with each of your children. I want you to think right now to your personal story. Did your parents read to you? Can you recall a specific title of a book? A specific story you asked your parents to share with you over and over and over again? Can you think deeply and hear the tone of your parent reading to you? Maybe how they brought characters to life. Those memories, if you're recalling them from a parent or an older sibling or a grandparent, those are parts of who we are, and they're gifts that you can give to your children over the course of their entire life. My first classic, my poor father, A Kiss for Little Bear. As far back as I can remember, that's the very first story, and I had to hear A Kiss for Little Bear not just once or twice, at least 3 times a night, over and over and over again. He'd ask me, would you like to hear a different story? No, I need A Kiss for Little Bear. And so he did his routine, and he was just so wonderful with that. And then he raised 2 girls, but we had a life of literature. And then I became a liberal studies major in college, and he had to listen to a lot of classical literature and history, and we've read together and so shared that. And in his final days, the exchanges of our voices in our reading relationship was a comfort and a joy and an honor and a gift to be shared between parent and child for both of us. Always know, no matter how old your children get, no matter how educated they become, as long as you are here for them, literature can make an impact, continues to make an impact, and influences the gifts that we give to each other and to the world. With that, thank you so much. We know how busy your lives are. We understand you have your families at home, and this is a commitment for you to come out on a Friday evening to be inspired. And I hope this is inspiring you, and you'll walk out tonight with the desire in your heart to read to your kids, have them read to you, and build that into your future for all the days to come. And I hope that you will join us for our very next Inspiring Greatness. That will be held Friday, February 1st, and the focus will be on servant leadership. Literature takes us on adventures together, builds curiosity, inspires us to greatness, and brings comfort to our souls. Thank you.